Open your mind. Open your mind.
O inglês Joe Bennett iniciou sua carreira como violonista freelancer ainda no período da faculdade. Em 94, mudou-se para a cidade de Bath, onde foi editor da revista Total Guitar, transcrevendo solos de guitarra dos mais variados artistas. Além das partituras, ele também escreveu em torno de 300 artigos e resenhas para as revistas Classic CD, Future Music, Roland UK e Music Tech. Em sua carreira acadêmica, Joe é bacharel em música pela Northumbria University e doutor na área de Songwriting pela Surrey University, realizando pesquisas nas áreas de criatividade, direitos autorais e processos de colaboração entre compositores. Foi chefe do departamento de música da City of Bath College e trabalhou por mais de 15 anos na BASCA University, como reitor e professor no curso de Commercial Music e no mestrado em Songwriting. Dentre as premiações que recebeu, como a National Teaching Fellowship e suas publicações de mais de 40 livros na área da música, Joe ainda é consultor musical para casos jurídicos onde há suspeita de plágio de canções. Membro ativo de organizações relacionadas ao songwriting, como British Academy of Composers and Songwriters e PRS for Music, Joe, sobretudo, atua como compositor em parceria com artistas europeus e latinos. Em 2015, ele deixou a Inglaterra para assumir o cargo de vice-presidente de relações acadêmicas no Boston Conservatory at Berklee, nos Estados Unidos, onde atualmente reside com sua esposa e filhos.
Joe, I would like to thank you so much for accepting my invitation. It's an honor to be here today. And I'd like to share with people that I was a BASCA University student. I took a master's in songwriting, and you were one of my professors at the time. So that's why I thought it would be really nice to, have this chat with you about creativity and collaborative songwriting. I got a quote from your blog that says, "Form doesn't restrict creativity, it defines it." So, yeah, I'd like to talk about it.
Okay, yeah, this is a subject very dear to my heart because I'm really interested in the way constraint affects creativity generally. I think it was Stravinsky that said, the more constraints one imposes, the more creative one can be. That constraint frees oneself of makes us free of the chains that shackle the spirit, as he put it. And I think I do know what he means, because if you say to somebody, go and be creative, they won't know necessarily what to do. They will scratch their head for a while, and of course that is a completely free and open brief. But if you say, write a poem about what it feels to be a dying butterfly in the forest, then that's a tightly defined set of parameters. And yet the person is still free to be creative in the way that they tell that story of how it feels to be a dying butterfly in the forest. To actually take an overview of constraint in creativity, I don't think you can have creativity without some sort of constraint. For example, if you make oil paintings, then you probably paint them on rectangular canvases. But we don't ever think about the fact that nearly every oil painting we see is on a rectangular canvas. I say that at the university campus. A rectangular canvas. And it's certainly not a problem. We don't go, oh, the Mona Lisa, that's a terrible piece of artwork. It's all just a rectangle.
Yeah.
It's what exists within the rectangle that is beautiful. And that's why with song form, for years and years, we've been basically reusing the same old song forms. The songs of William Shakespeare are not so different in the form and the way that they're laid out than a pop song from 2010, 2015. But in terms of song form, in the USA and UK tradition, of the sort of commercial popular song that existed within the 20th century. Really, two song forms have dominated. One is the AABA, the 32-bar standard, so songs like Somewhere Over the Rainbow, Ain't Misbehaving, Making Whoopee, they're all the same. An 8-bar verse, another 8-bar verse, a bridge section, usually with a key change, and a final 8-bar verse. The whole thing takes about 1 minute and 20 seconds when you play it, and the title, it always goes in the A section and almost never in the B section. And that, for the first half of the 20th century, was the dominant song form certainly in the USA, in commercial songwriting. And then we had rock and roll in the 50s, and of course everything shifted because people wanted something that they could relate to, sing along to, dance to at a much faster tempo. So we ended up with a lot more reliance on choruses that people could sing along. And really, since the 50s, chorus form has been the norm. And now, in the UK top downloads, you hardly ever see an AABA form song. But the point is that these two forms have been derived by what I like to think of as a kind of evolution. The idea is the reason that those forms are popular is because listeners like them. And listeners buy them. Songwriting is a commercial form, so songwriters think, I'll write more songs that the listeners like, and so the evolution continues, and songwriters keep giving people what they want to hear. And if what they want to hear is choruses that repeat several times in the song, then songwriters will keep writing them. Popular song is itself a constrained art form. There are so many things that when you say, I'm going to play you a song, that you already expect. You expect you're going to hear the voice in maybe 10 to 15 seconds. You expect it probably will be in 4/4 time. You expect it will last no longer than 4 or 5 minutes. And you expect it will be in 4 or 8 or 16 bar sections. And of course, not all songs do that, and not all songs have to do that. But these are what I call the constraints of song, and they're the expectations a listener has, and then it's up to the composer to go with those expectations or break them. And of course, roughly 80% of songs, certainly in the UK and USA tradition, are about love or dancing, and those are the universal themes of what we write songs about. So I'm always interested when my students say to me, I don't want to write songs about love or dancing. I always say, well, why not? Everyone understands love and everyone understands dancing, and there's so much that listeners can feel when they hear a song about one of those two subjects. So it is sometimes challenging for me as a teacher when my students say, I love my cat. I want to write a song about my cat. And I say, well, I'm sure you do love your cat. That's a really good thing. But are you sure that there are listeners in the world that want to hear about how much you love your cat? Don't you want to write a song about love or dancing? I've never had a problem with popularity. What songwriter doesn't want to be popular? Yeah. And if that means that you're more likely to write songs that are about love or dancing and in 4/4 time in 8-bar chunks with verses and choruses, then that's no bad thing. Within that box there is still something beautiful to be had.
So, well, based on that, what would make a song original? And like using these constraints, but what would make it really stand out, in your opinion?
Well, to make a song original, all you have to do is come up with a combination of notes and chords and words that nobody has done before, and that's actually quite easy to do. Mm-hmm. The law of probability is such that you don't have to write very many notes until just statistically you're likely to have come up with a new string of notes. Whether they sound great is another matter entirely. But I don't think my opinion on what makes a good song is very important. I think the opinion of many thousands or millions of listeners is what is important, and that it is that popularity that defines the evolution of the mainstream of song, and therefore the people who work on the edges and do the stuff that's one might even say more original, but perhaps less popular, those are the people whose creativity is helping to drive songwriting forward. And originality is easy. Everybody's original, every songwriter is an individual, and they all bring their own unique personality and their own unique musical experience to the work. Every single one of us has a different listening library in our head.
Yeah.
We've all heard a different combination of songs in our lifetimes. And each one of them is some kind of an influence on our musical memory and on the things that we might come up with when we're composing. So by definition, that means that every songwriter is different and every songwriter is original. But I think what listeners want is the perfect balance of the familiar and the new. If you write something that is completely familiar to listeners, then it won't excite them. But if you write something that is so far away from every song that they've ever heard before, it equally won't excite them. And for really great songwriters, I think, find that balance of what is predictable and what is unpredictable in the mind of the listener.
Mind the gap.
I'd like to ask you about English lyrics because I had an experience in the course because I am a Portuguese native speaker. So I would translate my songs to English, and usually people would comment, wow, this sounds so poetic, because I was not necessarily telling a story in my songs. So I'm curious about your opinion, or if you could tell us about this, how people tend to write lyrics in English, if there is a difference.
Okay, it's very difficult to say whether there is a difference, because unlike you, I'm not bilingual, so I don't speak Portuguese. It certainly, to my English ears, a Portuguese song sounds very beautiful, very lyrical, very romantic. And I think that is true sonically of the Romance languages. So and I think that Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian particularly have an emphasis on the vowel in singing that to English ears is very beautiful and very appropriate, very easy to listen to when sung. By contrast with the Germanic languages, for example, when I hear songs sung in German, I find them much more difficult to listen to because the vowels tend to close down in a way that the Romance languages don't. But in English, which is a kind of a hybrid of the two historically, there are a huge number of tropes and conventions that have been established through songwriting tradition, through the folk tradition, as we would call it in England, so many hundreds of years of traditional music, that have become known to songwriters. And I'll try and clarify by giving an example. English, like every language, has its limitations in terms of words that are used to describe emotional states. So the most obvious example in English is we've only really got one word to talk about your spirit, your id, your oneness with oneself, and that word is...
That's so interesting.
The word that we use is our heart. We say our heart, you know, and in love songs, I give you my heart, you stole my heart, you broke my heart. Well, take that idea of the heart, really it's the best word we have in songwriting to talk about our feelings using a metaphor. We don't literally mean my heart, although when one is heartbroken, it feels like your heart is hurting emotionally. The challenge then becomes a linguistic one for a songwriter. There are only really 3 rhymes for heart. Heart, start, apart, and maybe art. But you wouldn't really rhyme heart with art. So what we then have is decades and decades of songwriting cliches. because songwriters they've only got one word they can use, and there are only 2 rhymes for it. So we've heard hundreds, maybe thousands of songs with "You broke my heart, I've been torn apart, let's go back to the start," because what else can the songwriter do? So when I'm working with students, that becomes like, that's a language problem-solving exercise. And one of the ways of solving the problem for a songwriter is you don't put the word heart at the end of the line. You move the word heart earlier in the line. "You broke my heart, I didn't know what to do," and then you've got all of the rhymes for the word "do."
Okay.
Now I imagine there are similar, what I call rhyme traps, in Portuguese or Spanish or any other language that we might write songs in. And because we're all talking about the same thing, love or dancing most of the time, the language that we have to express it in mainstream song is really quite limited. Unless we want to go to the edges and write really unusual, strange lyrics that are more unfamiliar to listeners, and that's how we make progress. But the English language isn't going to change so much that there will be a lot more rhymes for heart coming up. So sure enough, the rhymes that we see for the word heart now are not far off the ones used by Shakespeare and Chaucer and other English poets hundreds of years ago.
I have a feeling this is all my perception. I'm one Brazilian, like the
But
country's
your film,
huge.
yeah.
But I feel like we tend to be more comfortable than English speakers with the fact that we don't understand lyrics, because we listen a lot of music in English in Brazil. And we most of the people don't speak English, I guess, and we enjoy the songs, So when I came here, I felt that people wanted to follow something, to follow a story, and again, it's my perception, but I'd like you, if you could comment on that.
Well, not all songs have to have meaningful lyrics. Sometimes it's just nice the way the words sound. And there have been many great songs written, including massive hits, where the words don't make a whole lot of sense if you just read the lyric. You might say that about maybe a global band like Coldplay or U2. They are words that sound great when you sing them and feel really good. But what they actually mean is perhaps secondary. And that's perhaps as it should be, especially when you see a big stadium band like that. You want to hear just great vowels going over tens of thousands of people. And it's got to feel good to sing. And this is the thing about lyrics, that yes, they can have a storytelling function, particularly if you are a folk or maybe country artist. Humans love to be told stories, and song is one of the media through which we can be told stories. But what's unique about lyrics is that they only exist to be sung. They are not poetry. You're not really supposed to just get the lyrics and read them like a book. You've got to hear them sung. So they are only truly in the world when they're sung with a melody and by a singer, with all of that implies that the singer's personality will be expressing them, the actor will be playing the part of the narrator who's singing the song. And that gives lots of dramatic opportunities. Yes, we can use it for storytelling, but that's not to say that all English lyrics tell a story. Quite the reverse, actually, that there are a huge number of song lyrics that are just about a moment in time, or about a feeling, or maybe it's not really even clear what they're about at all. Audiences think, they have the artist they love, and they want to know, how do you write your songs? Tell me about your creative process. And I don't think they want to know the answer to that question, really. How do you write your songs? Because you know yourself as a songwriter, sometimes you're sitting there and you're going, this line has 5 syllables in it, and I need it to have 4, and you can't make it work, and it's like a puzzle. So you sing the version with 5 syllables over and over again, and you can't quite make the words fit, and eventually you find a way to get it down to 4 syllables just by doing it over and over and coming up with new ideas and trying out what works. Well, to tell somebody that you did that when what eventually comes out is a beautiful 4-syllable sung line that speaks to somebody's heart, they don't want to know that it was originally 5 syllables and you spent an hour trying to fix it. But of course, those are the practical tasks that songwriters have to do to make the song work absolutely perfectly. So it stands to reason that people don't really want a detailed description of how songwriting works. They want a romanticised version of it. Who is your song for? Who is it that you're trying to communicate with? What is that person like? What do you feel about your listener? And how might you best communicate emotionally, narratively with them? Because if you've got an idea of the person to whom you're singing, maybe that might make you a better communicator in song. And I think that's an underrepresented aspect of songwriting. When people interview songwriters in the media, the songwriter talks a lot about what they wanted to express. But of course, if you're not expressing your ideas to someone, you're not expressing anything at all.
Yeah.
The idea of expression is a form of communication, and that, for me, as a songwriting teacher, I think that's what one of the goals a songwriter should be aiming at. What they want to communicate and how they want to communicate it is their personal creative decision, and it's not for me as a teacher to tell songwriters what to write. But I do hope that I've played a part in helping my students to think more about their listeners.
Mind the gap.
When did you get interested in collaborative songwriting?
I think it was probably around about 2005 when I realised that so many of my students were writing songs together. And then I did a little bit of academic research, and then I realised that almost 50% of the top 40 hits from the Billboard chart in the USA for the last 60 years, almost 50% have been written by more than one person. And I thought that's really interesting, just as a statistical fact, because it's really rare that in any other job somebody would say, I'm going to work today and I'm going to give away half of my money, which is what it means economically for a songwriter to collaborate. I thought, well, that's really interesting. If someone's willing to give away half of what they own when they start work that morning, then there must be some massive incentive for songwriters to really want to collaborate. So therefore it follows that the other collaborator must contribute something enormously important to the individual songwriter. So I just started investigating it, partly through getting my own students to collaborate with each other, and partly through reading around the subject and interviewing other songwriters. And of course, when you think about it, all music is a team effort. Unless you are one guitar player and you write your own song and you go out into the street with just your guitar and play a song, which I know you do sometimes. But for a lot of what you do and what every musician does, the actual end result of what the audience hears is a result of a team effort.
Yeah, totally.
So when we're making a recording, it might be that one person has written the song, but there might be another person arranging it or mixing it or placing the microphones or doing the mastering. There are so many people between the songwriter's brain and the listener's experience in recorded music, and to an extent in live music, particularly if you're writing for a band. Every member of that band is going to be contributing something important to the overall listener's experience. So I often think of it like a movie. The song's really just the script, and the songwriters are the script writers, but you still might have a director and actors and lighting people and sound people and all the things a movie might have. So the idea of teamwork is built into so much music making, and I think we perhaps sometimes spend too much time getting obsessed with the creative vision of one person. You know, when you hear a wonderful songwriter on stage playing some of their work, you're being invited into their world, you're being invited to experience their worldview. If they're a singer-songwriter, you're going to be hearing them singing their own lyrics and telling their own stories about how they feel and what they've experienced. But it's still really a result of teamwork, and particularly if the song is written collaboratively, that's a really unusual challenge, because often more than one person is trying to get together to write something that will be sung by only one person. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to distill these ideas and make an authentic voice, the voice of the singer, the narrator, the person who tells the story. And I love the process. I love doing it. I love watching people doing it, and I love helping people to do it, because it's negotiation. It's I have one creative idea. I play my little riff, and you say, Joe, that riff really sucks. I hate your riff. And you say, I've got a better riff, and you play it to me, and I say, well, maybe your riff's okay, but I'd like to change a couple notes. And by the time we've finished that conversation, we have a really good riff that two people have agreed is really good, not just one person. Yeah. And I think that is part of the reason that collaboration is so popular. The other part of it is that when you're writing songs on your own, you only have yourself as the audience. So you're having to make that judgment about whether your ideas are any good. But when you're working with a collaborator, you have an audience member right there in the room who can tell you whether your riff sucks or not and help you to make it better. So that those two things, the idea that when there are two or more of you, you have more skills in the room, and when there's two or more of you, you have a listener in the room who can tell you whether your own ideas are any good. I think those are the two most powerful reasons that collaborative songwriting is so successful and important.
So, Joe, I'd like to thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Welcome.
It was a pleasure to be here and discuss those wonderful things with you.
Thank you.
Mind the gap. Mind the gap.
I'm heading to the London Eye.
Mind the gap.
Lots of people under a grey sky.
Mind the gap.
Every minute and a half, a bus comes by.
Set your time.